Welcome to the AECI Plant Health Podcast, where we have conversations that help you unlock nature's potential.
En nou fokus ons op die wyndruifbedryf of industrie en gesels met Patrique. Hy is 'n tegniese adviseur spesialis vir die suidstreek vir AECI Plant Health. Patrique, good morning. This has been an out of the ordinary season for the Western Cape. Could you elaborate on this?
No, good morning, Lisa. Thank you for having me. So far, with regards to the season this year in the wine and table grape industries, it's been really out of the ordinary for a variety of reasons. We don't want to focus on Corona and all those sorts of things, but more so on what's happening down on the ground with the grower themselves. So very hands-on things, which have made it, as per usual, challenging in different aspects, but it's quite a dynamic industry and the guys have to adapt, and the ladies, of course. But if we start just from the winter, we had an exceptional winter that was wet and very, very cold. We had a lot of snow on the mountains. And for that reason, we had dams that were filling up, which we've wanted for many years. Obviously, in the past, we were struggling. But the snow melt has meant there's been a slow seepage of water into the ground and into the water table and into all the catchment areas, which we're all blessed about. And what this did lead to, though, is that our vineyards were budding 2 to 3 weeks later than usual. And for that reason, we initially think what's going to happen is the whole industry going to be a little delayed and on our back foot. But our budding, when it came to spring, was very even and very strong. So that was a good sign. In some cases, we even saw the buds on the vineyards, the primary, secondary, and tertiary buds were all coming out at the same time. So for us, we see then, we at least perceive that our crops are doing well and they're very healthy. And then what came along in November, the end of spring, was an exceptional amount of rain. I think there was more than 100% more than what happened in the long-term mean in the past. So this is something that, you can only predict what may happen in the future, in the next coming months. And summer then obviously started off a bit cooler than usual, with a bit more cloud cover. And then opposed to the normal situation where we have a slow incline of temperatures, a bit more sunshine, higher UV intensities and so on, we had those sudden hits of extreme temperatures that we had. I'm sure everyone can remember when we, in some places, were the hottest place in the world.
Yeah, I know. So what has this meant for the wine grower?
So with the cold winter, as I mentioned, it's a good thing. Our vines can sleep. Same in the other industries in the poem and stone. Essentially, they go into a dormant period, which is really important. But what happens when we have a delayed budding that is also very strong is that we have canopies that are very aggressive and fast growing. And what that would mean is that the farmer needs to allocate, or needed to, in past tense, is they need to put more energy and time into managing those canopies, more so than in the past. But couple that with a high rainfall, which isn't just as an absolute value, but also the frequency of those rainfalls. So very little time that you can get into the vineyard and manage those canopies. It can be quite difficult when the soils are wet and your machinery is maybe slipping around. Then you have this double up of, it's wet, I can't get in, I can't manage my canopies. And when you do get the time, you can go in, do your best to manage and remove some of that vegetation, which is very important. Because if you don't remove the vegetation, you don't get good airflow, good light penetration, and so on. And that, coupled with the rain itself, makes for a very conducive environment for disease development. So you can see how this sort of builds on top of each other. If we had a high rainfall, but in one incident, then it's easy to get into vineyards. And as mentioned, when we came into the summer months, it was a slow progression of temperatures increasing. And so when we had that sudden spike, then it puts the plants under stress. And any organism that's under stress is more susceptible to disease as well. So this combination of events makes almost for a perfect setting for disease development, because you also then, if you're taking time out of applying the necessary chemistry or products or your choice of product into the vineyard to control disease, then, now it's a big gamble of the times you have to operate between maintaining and controlling those diseases.
Yes, so how should growers approach the disease management in their vineyards in such a season like what we were just talking about?
This is a very good question, because we've moved out of a cycle of drought, and we moved into now a season or a cycle of rain and moisture. And this is meaning we can only put that next year will be fairly similar to this, although we'll have different factors, of course. But in anticipation, one way to counter this or prepare for the following season really is to maintain those canopies, to avoid, as mentioned, very dense canopies, because then the air can flow through, you get more sunshine. And if the air flows through, then that moisture that's sitting on the leaves and the grapes and so on can dry, because certain diseases like downy mildew require free water that sits on the leaves. And if you get your canopy maintenance done properly, then it allows for good product use and good product coverage of both the grapes and the leaves. If there's excess volume of vegetation sitting there, you're not going to get good coverage. And in the case where it's very wet, you'd want to choose spray intervals that are much shorter. So farmers have the option, if conditions are less conducive to disease control, let's say, then you can spread out your spray intervals a little bit. But in this case, you need to choose short spray intervals and to use the best products that you can afford. And these sorts of recommendations will obviously come from their crop advisors and having a good relationship and very open communication within their companies and with their crop advisors, so they can adjust programs accordingly. If we sit with a fixed spray program, but nature has its own decisions and it goes ahead, our spray programs necessarily won't fit into that. So to have that communication is very important, to adjust so that you don't give the disease a chance to overtake. And then generally speaking, plant health is always very important. To get in and get your plant as healthy as you possibly can before a season as we anticipate, then your plant is able to shrug off diseases that you probably, or disease intensity that you probably were worried about, So unhealthy plants, like unhealthy people, are more susceptible. So if you can have a very healthy program, that's basically a combination of factors that can ensure the success of your vineyard going forward.
Patrique, thank you very much. Just in closing, what can be done to ensure the success in the coming season?
So over and above what I've just mentioned, I think very important is, as the teams sit down at the end of their harvests, that they identify where in their farms they have hotspots. So this is where they struggle heavily with disease, or where they seem to find that those parts of the farm are more susceptible to disease development. To take note of those areas, possibly remove any vegetation that's sitting there post-season, because it can, let's say, it'll have the inoculum that may, or the spores from those diseases that could flow into the next season. You want to remove that. So vineyard sanitation is very important. And then also discussing your spray program once again. If you feel that maybe some products didn't work up to the standard that you were hoping, to adjust those, and also manipulate your spray programs, because internationally we get a lot of pressure from which chemistries we can or can't use. And if those products are coming out of your spray program, look for acceptable substitutes that can go in there. Ultimately, being flexible.
Patrique Levieu, hy is 'n tegniese adviseur spesialis vir die Suidstreek vir AECI Plant Health, wat vandag met ons gesels het oor die wyndruifbedryf. En vir meer inligting, kontak hulle gerus by www.aeciph.com. Ek herhaal, www.aeciph.com.
Another production from Solid Gold Podcasts.